This week on The Watchman, a major political shakeup in Israel, a controversial Mideast peace proposal from France, and Iran, ISIS, and a host of enemies on the march. An all-star panel of Middle East experts joins us from Jerusalem to break down what it all means for Israel and America.
Israel is the security anchor. Israel is perceived by the Sunni Arab establishment as the light unto the Middle East nations.
It's The Watchman. It's Christians united for Israel, only on TBN. And welcome to The Watchman from TBN's Jerusalem studio. Well, from time to time, our team at Christians United for Israel likes to bring you the Watchman All-Star Panel to make sense of everything that's going on here in the Middle East and around the world in Israel and how it affects you sitting there at home. And folks, there is a lot to talk about. We have a new defense minister here in Israel, Avigdor Lieberman. We have Saudi and French peace proposals. We have Iran continuing on the march. We have the ISIS caliphate. We have Hamas, Hezbollah, so much more. So we're very fortunate today to have two of the world's leading Middle East analysts to break it all down for us. I'm joined today by Dan Diker of the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs and Dr. Eldad Pardo of Hebrew University and Impact SC to discuss peace plans, political processes, Iran, ISIS, and what it all means for America. So fasten your seatbelt and get ready for another Watchman All-Star Panel. Take a look. Dr. Pardo, Dan, thanks so much for joining us today on The Watchman. So much to talk about, gentlemen. We need, I think, 5 shows to cover it all, but I think a good place to start is with some current news here in the Middle East and in particular here in Israel. Avigdor Lieberman is now Israel's defense minister. Moshe Bogi alone is out. Dan, I'll start with you. What's the significance of Lieberman now ascending to that position of defense minister? What does it mean for the region? Is it a game changer?
It could well be a game changer, Eric, for several reasons. One, politically, it really appears that the prime minister is rebuilding his coalition. He's not just increasing the coalition from a fragile 61 to an incrementally more stable 66 members of Knesset, but what he's doing is actually quite substantially shifting the coalition from what's perceived as a hard right coalition, ironically, with Lieberman, to be a more right-centrist coalition. How does that work? It works by bringing in Lieberman, who is far more, in terms of diplomacy, more flexible than the West thinks he is.
You know, this is fascinating, gentlemen, and Dr. Pardo, I'll come to you on this. You are an acknowledged expert on Iran, one of the top experts on Iran in all of Israel. What does this mean for Iran, this new coalition? What does it mean in terms of Israel's approach to the Iran threat?
As Dan said, this government will be much more in a position to take decisions and make hard decisions to whatever directions. So if I were like Hezbollah or Iran itself, I would be very, very careful in every move because Israel might launch a peace initiative, it might attack, it will have much more robust support.
Yeah, because this would cover all political, basically, parties.
Exactly, yeah. Particularly if they can have good connections also to the centrist among the Labour Party. Right. And as Dan said, Lieberman is extremely pragmatic, and he has this Russian Putinist way of, okay,
strong.
Not only strong, we make a decision, we go for it.
We have a few peace plans floating around right now, a Saudi initiative, a French initiative. What's your take on all this peace plan talk?
Well, Eric, one thing that we've learned in Israel over the last 3-4 decades of peace plans, most of them have failed, a couple of them have succeeded, is that when the international community wants to lead, wants to shepherd a peace plan, it fails. When the Arab world and Israel decide to take on a peace dialogue and diplomacy between them, it's succeeded. 2 examples. The Oslo peace framework was actually negotiated between Israel and the PLO. Now, Oslo has not been an overwhelming victory, but it did create a successful outline, blueprint for moving forward on a diplomatic pathway with the Palestinian Authority. Better example, the Egyptian-Israeli Treaty of Peace and the Jordanian-Israeli Treaty of Peace were primarily negotiated between the two Arab republics, or the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan and Israel, and in the Egyptian situation with the Arab Republic of Egypt, Sadat, President, and Israel. You had Jimmy Carter in the Egyptian case host basically what was a signing and an after party. But the hard work of diplomacy and compromise was done between the parties. So what's happening these days and these weeks, when the French government has basically taken a unilateral action to bring 29 foreign ministers of 29 powers to determine the fate of Israel and its Arab neighbors is unheard of, and it's a mistake, and it will never succeed.
It's astounding. Israel is a sovereign nation. It can handle its own problems, thank you very much, in my view. Dr. Pardo, another interesting point here. You have this whole Sunni-Shia divide, and Israel's growing closer to some of the Sunni states, as we'll discuss more. But then you have that Iranian axis, Iran, the Assad regime, Hezbollah, etc. Can you talk a bit more about this Sunni-Shia? I don't even know if you can quite call it a Cold War. It's heating up in places like Syria, Yemen. Talk a bit more about that Sunni-Shia divide we're seeing now in the region.
Well, first of all, we have to see and realize that there are many cleavages, fights, enmities. It's all based in the Middle East on, first of all, tribal, then you have ethnic, and on top of it, the religious and theological, when typically the majority persecute the minority. So whether they are Christians, Druze, Aramaic, Assyrians, and so on. Now, on top of this, you have two groups. One are the anti-status quo or the imperialists. We used to think about imperialists, British imperialism, all of that. But you have Iranian imperialism that is based on expectation for the Mahdi, for the Redeemer.
The Islamic Messiah.
Yeah, and a racist notion. We are the Aryan people, and we should lead the Islamic world, and we should lead the entire world. Turkey, on the other hand, they say, we are the Ottoman Empire, we should rule the Middle East. And then you have Arab nationalism, and you have Islamist Sunni nationalism.
It's interesting, gentlemen, that we have this ISIS caliphate, we have Iran on the march in Yemen and Syria, elsewhere. Iraq's on fire, Syria's on fire, Libya's on fire. We can go on and on in the region. None of this really has anything to do with Israel. None of that is Israel's fault. Israel didn't cause the caliphate, didn't cause Libya to go up in flames, but Israel remains the center of the world's ire and kind of, taking the blame for everything going on in the Middle East. We have this whole theory of linkage, etc. But Dan, you think the Saudi peace plan is interesting. Tell us a little bit more why.
People will raise their eyebrows and they'll say, Erick, the Saudi peace plan, let me take a look at that. Doesn't that require Israel to pull back to the indefensible 1967 lines? And doesn't that call for the return of several million Palestinians into what today is the state of Israel? The answer is no, it doesn't, because the Saudi peace plan today is just a framework for everyone to get together. And it's my understanding that the Arab world is open to an unconditional coming together, no preconditions, to coming together around a table and call it the Arab League Peace Plan framework. That's what is very substantial about what's going on, and it is not just smoke and mirrors. There is something going on because the Arab Sunni world is terrified of Iran. And whom do they think is the only country in the world that can take care of Iran? Not the United States, with the greatest of respect to the world superpower, not even Russia. Today, Israel. Israel is the security anchor. Israel is perceived by the Sunni Arab establishment as the light unto the Middle East nations, and that's why Israel today has much more leverage diplomatically than it has had in the past.
Coming up after the break with Dr. Pardo, Dan Diker, we're going to talk more about Iran, ISIS, the ideology, and what it all means for you. There's much more coming up here on The Watchman from TBN's Jerusalem studio. It's The Watchman, it's Kufi, only right here on TBN. Stick around. On nearly every border, Israel is surrounded by enemies that seek its destruction. Vicious terror groups like ISIS, Hezbollah, and Hamas are acquiring deadlier and more advanced weapons as Iran moves ever closer to a nuclear bomb. At the UN, the international community shuns Israel. On college campuses, Jewish students are harassed and intimidated. God's chosen people are facing an all-out assault. As a Christian, how will you answer God if you choose to do nothing? It's time for Christians to take a stand. Join CUFI, America's largest pro-Israel organization, where 3 million Christians across the United States are working together to defend Israel in our classrooms, churches, and communities. From college campuses to Capitol Hill, CUFI is making a difference and fighting for Israel. Visit our website, cufi.org, and join the movement for such a time as this. We have Iran, its proxy Hezbollah on the Lebanon border to the north. We have Iran trying to make inroads into the Golan. What are Iran's goals here? Why would it want to encircle Israel the way it is doing?
They are 100% committed to their ideology, and this ideology is about uniting the Middle East, what they call the Islamic peoples, with Mecca and Medina. This is their goal, Mecca and Medina.
This is Iran's goal.
Iran's goal. They want to go to Mecca and Medina because from there they will control the Muslim world, and then, you know, they spread out to Latin America, North America, Europe.
It's an expansionist, revolutionary ideology.
Exactly. And what they see now in the Middle East is, after the 2011 Arab Spring, a lot of conflict, civil wars, and great many of them were actually unleashed by Iran. Definitely Iraq, because America pulled out. Iraq was functioning fantastically in 2011. Americans won the war big time. It was hard, but they won the war, 8 years, and they won the war. And they said, okay, Iran, come on, take care of Iraq. Iran destroyed it. They destroyed they destroyed the Sunnis, and here you have ISIS. Same with Syria. You had peaceful demonstrations, wanted to change the regime, not against anybody, even not against Assad. Just go, let us live. No, Iran was entered in, and they destroyed Yemen, all of that.
And the
idea is to cause as many civil wars across the Middle East, so the Arab world would decline, and then they will be able to encircle Israel, destroy Israel, and they speak all the time about this Quds force. Quds is Jerusalem. But for Shiites, Jerusalem is not holy at all.
Right.
It's only for the Sunnis. So it's a hoax. Yeah. But they want to destroy Israel so they can reach to Mecca and Medina. Yeah. That's the issue.
Fascinating, and we're talking about peace plans, and we have obviously the Iran nuclear deal, Dan, which was a disaster on many levels. It hasn't seemed to temper Iran's bad behavior one bit. Iran remains on the march across the region and sponsoring terror.
Iran now has hundreds of millions of dollars to back the Hezbollah, to back even Sunni terror organizations like Hamas, like the Islamic Jihad. They are the organizations, as Dr. Pardo said so well, that surround Israel. Syria is its state sponsor. Israel is a state proxy in the north. Lebanon to the north, Hamas in Gaza, and then we have Islamic Jihad, Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade in Judea and Samaria. So really, Israel is literally surrounded by these proxy organizations.
And real quick, I want to ask you about ISIS as well, Dan, but real quick, that Hezbollah threat, just real quick for our audience, give an idea of how serious that Hezbollah threat is, the rocket and missile arsenal, how it covers literally every inch of Israel.
I can tell you this, Eric, and this is unknown in the West. In what's called the Matkal, which is the military general staff, it is known that the major strategic threat against Israel is actually the Hezbollah missile and rocket threat from southern Lebanon. They have in excess, it is estimated, of 100,000 rockets and guided missiles that can hit any square kilometer in Israel.
Where we're sitting right now in Jerusalem.
And those directions and the salaries come out of Iran, and the ideology comes out of Iran. So Israel is much more concerned about that problem more than the actual nuclear development problem today of Iran, even though the deal, as you mentioned before, frees up Iran to worsen its behavior, to back these organizations, and to continue to march in order to take over the Middle East, as is their plan.
Even the nuclear issue is far from being solved. It's a kind of an illusion. Rouhani did the same trick in 2003. They say, okay, we know everything that we know.
The moderate Rouhani.
He's not moderate.
Of course
he's
not.
not moderate. He was involved in terrorism. He's involved in.
Of course.
I mean,
the
he's the best friend of Khamenei. That the concept is, we know everything that we need to know about enrichment. We have an amount of enriched uranium. That's fine. Now we have to develop the missiles. We have to develop the bombing. We have to develop the cyber. We need an air force. We need this. So we have now 10 years to build all of that. And 10, 15 years down the line, they'll have missiles, even nuclear missiles, threatening Israel's allies, threatening Israel.
Threatening the United States.
Threatening America,
Threatening the
which
United States.
we are going to come back right after the break and talk about that, gentlemen. We still have to get to ISIS. Unfortunately, they're still around, but taking some lumps here in the Middle East, which is a good thing. Gentlemen, more about the ideology and why it matters for America in particular. After the break, folks, much more with Dan Diker, Dr. Eldad Pardo. It's The Watchman. It's Christians United for Israel, only right here on TBN from Jerusalem. Stick around.
Iran's rulers promised to destroy my country, murder my people. The response from nearly every one of the governments represented here has been absolutely nothing.
To see evil and not call it evil is evil. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. God will not hold us harmless.
Join America's largest pro-Israel organization, Christians United for Israel, on July 18th and 19th for our annual Washington Summit. You'll meet with your elected officials and hear from experts and leaders, including Pastor John Hagee, Dr. David Jeremiah, Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North, and yours truly, Erick Stakelbeck. To register for CUFI's Washington Summit, call 1-877-706-2834 or visit cufi.org. Enter the promo code Watchman to attend the summit for a special discounted rate of just $75.
And welcome back to The Watchman, only right here on TBN from our Jerusalem studio. We're joined again by Dr. Eldad Pardo, Dan Diker, talking about the threats, how it affects Israel, and how it affects America. A lot of times, I believe, gentlemen, that my fellow Americans, God bless them, they see what's going on over here and they say, well, this is thousands of miles away. It does not affect me. Dan, I want to start in debunking that thought process with ISIS. We'll get to what they're doing in America in a second, but ISIS in the Sinai, at Israel's doorstep, along the border with Egypt. Talk about what ISIS is doing in the Sinai Peninsula, just literally on Israel's border.
Well, Eric, ISIS and its competitive group, cells affiliated with Al-Qaeda, have been in Sinai for some time now, and they have been the major strategic threat to the Egyptian government. And President al-Sisi has taken a very aggressive counterterrorism action against these groups. And they are really, there's a full-fledged ongoing war of attrition between the Egyptian government, the Egyptian army, and these radical Salafi terrorist organizations. Now, they are also cooperating with Hamas in Gaza. And for the Egyptians, and also for Israel, Hamas is synonymous with Al-Qaeda. There may be a little bit different Islamic strategy, Islamic identity, but their tactics and their end goal is the same thing. Gaza, Sinai in Egypt, against the Egyptian state as well as the Jewish state of Israel.
Yeah, shared enemies.
Shared enemies.
Egypt and Israel have shared enemies, just as Israel and America have shared enemies. By the way, I'd love to see the West be a little more embracing of President Sisi and what he's doing to fight terror, but that's another story for another day. We talk about ISIS in the Sinai, obviously, Dan. ISIS in America, as we talk here, why Americans should care, how this affects us. We know ISIS has a caliphate here in the Middle East. What's ISIS up to in the United States, in the West right now? ISIS, maybe its supporters, its acolytes in the West, what are they up to?
Well, first of all, Eric, you know, when Americans watch CNN and Fox and the other and TBN and TBN and watch the Egyptian Airlines plane, Egyptian airplane go down on its way to Cairo from Paris, the one question Americans should be asking themselves is, how on earth did the ISIS terrorists and their intelligence operatives penetrate the French national security and intelligence apparatus in order to bring that plane down? Because if they penetrated French security, which is among the best in the West, even though they suffered a year ago, or about 8 months ago, a terrible terrorist massacre in Paris,
of course.
Then those same terrorist operatives can get on planes from Paris to New York, or Paris to Los Angeles, or Paris to any other hub in the United States and carry out these mass casualty terrorist attacks as well.
Gentlemen, the barbarians are not just at the gates, they are inside the gates. If you're living in the West, Dr. Pardo, that includes Iran. I think a lot of times Americans, again, well, Iran's thousands of miles away. If they get the bomb, it doesn't affect us. Talk about the Iranian threat in the Western Hemisphere at America's doorstep.
Well, first of all, look, Khamenei speaks all the time about Islamic awakening in Europe. So they have their mind set on Europe. At the same time, they try to separate between Europe and the United States. And they train themselves, they look far away. They have a fantastic network, television network, cells, terrorist networks across Latin America, probably also inside the United States. They also work extremely...
This is the Iranian regime.
Yeah, they also work extremely hard on the intercontinental missiles together with North Korea and nuclear weapons, and what people not so much are aware of, cyber. Cyber is a center of their focus now.
And you know, it must be stated, Eric, from a diplomatic point of view, that the Iranians are laughing at the U.S. administration. They hate the U.S. administration even more for the deal than had the deal not been carried out, because they view it as the collapse of American political will. And that is, you know, that is an issue that has to be taken very seriously by the American people.
Yeah, if there's one thing tyrants do not respect, it's weakness and naivete. And unfortunately, we're seeing that among Western leaders, including in the U.S. right now, folks. Well, some final thoughts with Dr. Eldad Pardo, Dan Diker after the break. Don't go anywhere. It's The Watchman, only right here on TBN. Stick around.
Centuries-old churches and monasteries burnt to the ground, Christian villages ransacked, women and children enslaved, and believers in Jesus led to their deaths. ISIS has declared an all-out war on Christians. Believers in the Middle East outside of Israel are suffering horrible persecution. Christians United for Israel will not remain silent as Islamic extremists carry out a genocide against our brothers and sisters in Christ. On Capitol Hill, CUFI is working hard to ensure America's allies receive the aid they need to defeat ISIS. CUFI is leading a Raise Your Voice campaign to bring the issue front and center for Christians across America. Visit our website, cufi.org, to find out how you can stand with CUFI as we stand up for the persecuted church. If not us, who? And if not now, when?
And welcome back to The Watchman from TBN's Jerusalem studio. We're wrapping up with our all-star panel here, Dr. Eldad Pardo, Dan Diker. Gentlemen, eye-opening today, sobering in a lot of ways, but it's not all bad news here in the Middle East. And as we've been showing on this show each week, there are great things happening here in Israel, encouraging things. Dan, we'll start with you. What are some of the encouraging things you're looking to as we move forward?
Well, Eric, in the middle of this Middle East implosion, where there's the Middle East is on fire, stands this small, strong anchor of security and freedom and democracy called the State of Israel. And this is something, this is a concept, the light unto the nations, that was already forecast in the Bible, 3,000 years ago, and we are actually seeing it today in the streets of Israel, and as well as in the minds, in the moral imaginations of the larger Middle East. Israel's economy is growing at a 40% faster rate than the United States economy on a quarter-by-quarter basis. Israel has nearly $300 billion of investment monies coming into the economy every year. Israel has more companies on the American stock exchanges and the public exchanges than any other country besides Canada and the United States itself. I mean, it's extraordinary to see.
By the way, folks, as Christians are being literally decapitated in Iraq and Syria, they're being welcomed into Israel. This is the only place in the Middle East where there is complete freedom of religion. Dr. Pardo, we were talking during the break about the yearning for democracy among the peoples of the Middle East. That seems like an encouraging thing. Tell us a bit more about that before we wrap up.
They want democracy, they want freedom of religion, they want interfaith, they want to change, but it's very difficult for them. So we have to be patient, and we have to have this tough love. On the one hand, when you see something evil, you know,
of course,
show it, and don't try to, because you don't help by presenting evil as good. But on the other hand, there is so much yearning for good and for spirituality and for democracy that we must not hate ourselves as we criticize evil. That's very important.
Dr. Pardo, you mentioned textbooks. Tell us about where we can find your great work. You're doing some work right now on textbooks.
Yeah, it's all on our website, Impact SE. SE stands for School Education. Impact SE.
Is that .org, .com?
.org. It's on the net. All the reports are there.
And you see the graphic on your screen, folks.
Yeah, and you can download that, and it's extremely eye-opening.
Dan, how about you?
Just came out with a new book called Unmasking BDS, Radical Roots, Extremist Ends. You can find that online at jcpa.org. That's the online version. Or call us at the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs here in Israel. The information's on the website, and you can actually purchase for a very inexpensive price the book so you can carry it with you.
And BDS, Dan, is another aspect of this war against Israel. We've talked about kind of the military threats today, the terror threats. BDS, boycott, divest from, sanction Israel, folks. We've talked about it here on the show. This is the goal of destroying Israel just by other means.
100%.
I guess you're saying BDS, very dangerous thing. Gentlemen, thank you so much. We'll do it again soon here in sunny Jerusalem. It was great. And folks, when I think about our panel today and Dan and Dr. Pardo, the great information they shared, why it's so important, the Bible says, my people perish for lack of knowledge. Well, now you're educated. Thanks to our all-star panel here. We'll have much more coming in the weeks to come here on The Watchman. Thanks for joining us this week. And until next time, God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace.